गाइस 5 मिनट में ऐसे चालू करने वाले हैं, तो अपने ऐसे फ्रेंड्स को बुला लो और व्हाट्सएप ग्रुप्स इन सब में डाल दो भाई। वर्कशॉप चालू होने वाली है।
गाइस, हमने डिस्कॉर्ड चैनल पे एक अनाउंसमेंट चैनल चैनल पे एक जिप फोल्डर भेजा था। उसे डाउनलोड कर लो। वो हेल्पफुल होगा तुम्हारे गेम के उसमें टास्क में। उसमें एक्चुअली पहले से HTML एंड CSS थोड़ा सा लिखा हुआ है, which would be helpful for you guys. आई गेस अब स्टार्ट कर देते हैं हम। ठीक है, तो हेलो एंड वेलकम गाइस टू द वर्कशॉप ऑन जावास्क्रिप्ट। Before introducing JavaScript to you guys, I would like to introduce you to the concepts behind interpreters and compilers and the differences between them. ये तुम्हें JavaScript है क्या, कैसे काम करती है, अंडरस्टैंड करने में हेल्पफुल रहेगा. So both compilers and interpreters are programs that help convert the high-level languages source code into machine codes to be understood by the computers. Computer programs are usually written in high-level languages. A high-level language is one that can be understood by humans, and computers cannot directly understand them. Basically, high-level language किसी भी एक हमारे normal human language में लिखा होता है. जैसे कि हम most of the languages English में लिखते हैं, इस ताकि हमें समझ में आ जाए. बट कंप्यूटर्स कैन नॉट डायरेक्टली अंडरस्टैंड इंग्लिश, वो तो बाइनरी सिस्टम समझते हैं. तो बेसिकली that is the function of compilers and interpreters to convert the high level languages into something that the computers can understand. So
रिकॉर्डिंग ऑन कर दी ना?
recording on है, I guess.
हाँ, ओके, फाइन.
So compiler scans the entire program and translate the whole of it into machine code at once and creates an executable file to run the program. This executable file is different for different computers, operating system, yeah, different systems. For example, the .exe file in Windows, it is a pre-compiled, it is a basically compiled version of the program written converted by a compiler. Whereas the interpreter translates just one statement of the program at a time into machine code. Thus, it does not generate any intermediary executable file like the .exe file that we earlier saw. Now, what is the difference between a scripting and a programming language? Now, when you start exploring the field of computer science, you will find the terms scripting and programming languages. They are both different, and scripting languages are actually a subset of programming languages. So, although all scripting languages are programming languages, all programming languages are not scripting languages. So, where does the difference actually lie? The primary difference between a scripting language and a programming language lies in their execution. So, programming languages use a compiler to convert the high-level programming languages into machine-level code. On the other hand, scripting languages use an interpreter. So the programs written in programming languages have to compile on every other system they run on. मतलब system different हो, चाहे laptop different हो, उनका processor different हो, या उनका operating system different हो, हर बार जो programming languages में लिखे हुए programs होते हैं उनको बार बार compile करना पड़ता है जिस system पे वो use हो रहा है. Whereas the programs that are written using scripting languages can be universally run on any machine, as they are compiled in a step-by-step manner by an interpreter. The programming languages can run natively on a system, whereas scripting languages require a special runtime to execute their program. So some of the examples of both are C, C++, C#, Java are some kinds of programming languages, whereas JavaScript, Perl, PHP, Python are examples of scripting languages. So now we head to our main topic. What exactly is JavaScript? JavaScript is basically a scripting or a programming language that allows you to create dynamically updating content and implement complex features on web pages, displaying timely content updates, interactive maps, animated 2D, 3D graphics, etc. While it is most well known as a scripting language for web pages, as originally JavaScript was designed to run only in web browsers. Nowadays, many non-browser environments also use it, such as Node.js, which is a special runtime for JavaScript written in C++. It can be explained later on. So how does JavaScript actually work? Almost all of the modern day web browsers have something called the JavaScript engine. The JavaScript engine is a program written in, let's say, C++, which goes through all the JavaScript code, character by character, line by line, and transforms it into something that the computer CPU can understand and execute machine code, which is which is actually the job of an interpreter. So like हमने पहले जैसे समझाया था, interpreter line by line compile करता है programs को, तो JavaScript engine is a kind of an interpreter. For example, JavaScript engine in Chrome is called V8, and JavaScript engine in Firefox is called SpiderMonkey. So what can JavaScript actually do? JavaScript is a very powerful scripting language, and it can do multiple things like store useful values inside variables. For instance, we ask for new name to be entered, then store that name in a variable called name. Operations on pieces of text, also known as strings in programming. For example, we take the string player1 semicolon, uh, player one colon, and join it to another name variable to create a complete text label. For example, player one colon Chris. We can do this by a addition sign. Running code in response to certain events occurring on a web page. For example, a click event to detect when a button is clicked and perform some action that we want to in a web browser. Here, I have written a small piece of code that you can copy it and write it in a index.html file. And when you open this index.html file, this can show you how JavaScript can detect events like the clicking of a button in a web browser and perform some action regarding it. Like when you run this in a web browser, this code, it will show you a button. On clicking the button, this string will get displayed on the web page. So this magic is caused by JavaScript basically. So when you learn about JavaScript, you are bound to come across the term ECMA script or ECMA script. So how is it different from JavaScript? Like any other language, JavaScript has its own rules for functions, variables, data types, and the exact values these data types can store, wherein the code is accessible and where not, and so on. These rules are defined by a standards organization known as ECMA International or ECMA International, and together they form the language specification also known as ECMA script or ECMA script. So when the JavaScript engine transforms the JavaScript code into machine code, it needs to consider the specifications. While learning about JavaScript, one of the most important terms that you might be hearing is APIs. I mean, whenever you learn about JavaScript, कभी भी आप सीखोगे तो APIs तो definitely will have a role to play. So, what are they? When writing client-side JavaScript for websites or web applications, you will quickly encounter application programming interfaces. APIs are programming features for manipulating different aspects of the browser and operating system the site is running on, or manipulating the data from other website or services. There are basically two types of APIs in client-side JavaScript: browser APIs and third-party APIs. Browser APIs Browser APIs are built into your web browser and are able to expose the data from the browser and surrounding computer environment and do useful and complex things with it. They are actually APIs for manipulating documents loaded into the browser. The most obvious example is the DOM, which is also called the Document Object Model API, which allows you to manipulate HTML and CSS, creating, removing, and changing HTML, dynamically applying new styles to our page, and etc. The possibilities are endless. So they are also used to fetch data from the server to update small sections of a web page on their own, are very commonly used. APIs that make this possible include XML HTTP request and the fetch API. You may also come across the term AJAX, which describes this technique. Now, what are third-party APIs? Third-party APIs are generally used to get information from the server of some other website, like the Twitter API, which allows you to do things like displaying your latest tweets on a website. The Maps API and the Google Maps API allow you to do all sort of things with the maps on your web pages, that might be very complicated to make on your own. The Twitter API, which allows you to embed YouTube videos on your site, search YouTube, and build playlists. So basically, APIs make the development of websites much easier. They are actually complex codes that we can that are already written, and we can just use them directly in our website. So after learning all of this in JavaScript, so let us learn more about JavaScript by applying it and using the application side of JavaScript by making a game. Now off to you, Ritvik. We will be taking a short break of 5 minutes. You can ask your doubts in the Discord channel.
होस्ट बना देंगे आगे। आदित्य भटनागर भटनागर होस्ट बना दे मुझे। हेलो
बना दिया बना दिया बना दिया।
तो हेलो एवरीवन, मैंने जो पोस्ट डाला था डिस्कॉर्ड पे फॉर दोज ऑफ यू हु आर ऑन डिस्कॉर्ड, प्लीज वो जो मैंने हाँ, तो वो जो मैंने जिप फाइल अपलोड किया था, प्लीज उसे अनजिप कर लो किसी भी फोल्डर में। ज़्यादा सेटअप का कोई ऐसे लोड नहीं है, बस जस्ट उसे अनजिप कर लो किसी भी फोल्डर में। एंड अगर कोई प्रॉब्लम आ रही है जस्ट पोस्ट टू आवर चैनल। ओके, सो उसे डबल क्लिक करने से वो कोड नहीं खुलेगा, बिकॉज इट इज HTML फाइल। तो उसे तुम्हें ओपन विथ ऑप्शन, राइट क्लिक करके ओपन विथ ऑप्शन आएगा, एंड यू विल हैव टू सिलेक्ट द एडिटर यू वांट इट टू ओपन। तो उसे वो एडिटर से ओपन कर लो तुम लोग प्लीज जल्दी से। तो उसमें कुछ कोड मिला होगा, आई गेस HTML कोड।
ऋत्विक, जस्ट टू मेक श्योर रिकॉर्डिंग चल रही है ना?
रिकॉर्डिंग, अच्छा मुझे फिर से स्टार्ट करना होगा ना?
यहाँ पे आ रहा है रिकॉर्डिंग इज ऑन, तो
हाँ, मेरे में
चेक
भी
कर लेना।
रिकॉर्डिंग इन प्रोसेस आ रहा है। ठीक है कोई नहीं।
ठीक है कूल। गाइस, ये जो लिंक है ना, ये डिस्कॉर्ड चैनल पे होगा हमारे, एंड प्लीज ज्वाइन कर लो से, शेयर द डिस्कॉर्ड
ओके,
लिंक।
कुछ सेटअप में कोई प्रॉब्लम आ रही है क्या? प्लीज यहाँ पे पोस्ट कर दो। ओपन विथ ओपन विथ जिन जिनको प्रॉब्लम हो रही है सोर्स कोड खोलने में, जो HTML फाइल तुम्हें दिख रही होगी इंडेक्स, उसे ओपन विथ करके अपने एडिटर से खोलो प्लीज। भटनागर इनको लिंक डाल दे यार, ये क्या
डिस्कॉर्ड
बोलते
का।
हैं स्क्वाड का, कुछ लोग यहाँ पे नए भी हैं।
वेट वेट।
तो हम वर्कशॉप हमारी शार्प 4:25 पे शुरू करेंगे। तब तक लेट्स मेक श्योर कि सबका फाइल वगैरह अनजिप हो गया हो, प्रॉपर उसे एडिटर में खोल लिया हो सबने, सो दैट साथ साथ हम कोड करते हैं। तो प्लीज डिस्कॉर्ड पे पोस्ट करते चलो अगर कुछ प्रॉब्लम आ रही है तो। कुछ लोगों को समझ में नहीं आ रहा है, कुछ यहाँ पे बोल रहे हैं। अरे सिंपल है यार, मतलब फाइल तो अनजिप करते बन गया होगा आई गेस। फाइल अनजिपिंग तो काफी सिंपल है, इसलिए हमने मतलब कुछ लोगों को उससे प्रॉब्लम थी गिट वगैरह वाली, तो इसलिए जिप कर दिया था मैंने। अम,
Guys, we would prefer तुम VS Code से खोल लो
VS
and
Code.
no other setup is
You
required.
have VS Code, तो please VS Code से खोलो, else any editor of your choice.
We'll wait for 5 more minutes. कुछ लोगों का
हाँ,
सेटअप बचा.
कुछ लोगों का या ये एक बंदे ने डाला है, तो यहाँ से भी डाउनलोड कर सकते हो सारी फाइल्स जो हैं. एक्सट्रैक्ट करने के लिए फाइल्स यू कैन यूज वो जो winrar करके फोल्डर होता है ना, या फिर कोई भी जो भी अनजिप कर सकता हो. और अगर जिप अनजिप करते नहीं बन रही, तो एक बंदे ने डिस्कॉर्ड चैनल पे सेपरेट फाइल्स डाल दी हैं, तो तुम वो भी कर सकते हो यहाँ पर. बस यू नीड टू मेक श्योर कि वो सारे एक फोल्डर में हो. तो आई होप सबने डाउनलोड कर लिया है वो, और अनजिप भी कर लिया है. और वो जो ओके, मैं स्क्रीन शेयर करके बता देता हूँ. अच्छा,
तुषार, जिसकी CSS फाइल empty बता रहा है, वो प्लीज अपना ना जो भी इश्यूज हैं डिस्कॉर्ड पे डाल दो विद योर स्क्रीनशॉट ऑफ योर स्क्रीन. वहां पे सॉल्व कर देगा कोई ना कोई.
अरे शिट शिट, सॉरी, मेरा एक देख सकते. तो मेरी स्क्रीन दिख रही है क्या? मेरी स्क्रीन विजिबल है क्या? भटनागर कंफर्म कर दीजिएगा.
हाँ, स्क्रीन विजिबल है.
विजिबल है ना?
यस, वो स्प्लिट स्क्रीन है विजिबल.
हाँ ठीक है चलिए. स्क्रीन वन ही दिख रही है ना, फर्स्ट स्क्रीन.
या
ठीक है. सो ये देखो, ये ऐसे खोलना है तुम्हें. सो इस पे अगर तुम राइट क्लिक करके ओपन विथ करोगे, यहाँ पे ओपन विथ, तो ये बेसिकली तुम्हारे जो भी एडिटर्स हैं, यहाँ पे ऑप्शन आ जाएगा उसका. तो जो लोग बोल रहे थे अभी कि एक बार स्क्रीन शेयर करके दिखा दो, तो मैंने जैसे मेरे पास VS कोड है, तो मैं VS कोड से ओपन कर देता हूँ इसे यहाँ पे. Okay. तो फिर ये ऐसे कोड वाला खुलेगा. अगर तुम लोग डबल क्लिक करोगे, तो वो ब्राउजर पे खुलेगा बाय डिफॉल्ट, बिकॉज इट्स एन HTML फाइल. तो ये सही है क्या? आई गेस लेट्स स्टार्ट करेंगे. आगे देखते कुछ और दिक्कत होगी. ये वाली फाइल खोलनी है, ये जो इंडेक्स फाइल है ना, उसे कोड में खोलना है तुम्हें. इंडेक्स फाइल जो है, उसे कोड में खोलना है.
आई गेस स्टार्ट कर दे, थोड़ा बहुत समझा दे.
हाँ ठीक
काफी
है.
लोगों का हो गया
तो
होगा.
लेट्स स्टार्ट. हाँ, ओके. So hello everyone. I hope you guys are enjoying the lecture series of ING. So let me first introduce myself. I'm Ritvik Jain from third year applied mathematics, and today I'm here before you with a short tutorial on a game in JS. Considering your limited exposure to programming languages and logic building, we have tried to keep the game as simple as possible. It just contains some basic observation and which are really easy to implement. Right. So before we start, there are some things to keep in mind for the following few minutes we are gonna spend together. The first thing is just don't quit the lecture midway. If you face any difficulty or issue, please post your query on our Discord channel where our team is actively working to help you out. Second thing is it's completely fine if you don't understand some concept or some part of the lecture. Just mark it and focus on the further part. Okay. So like it's not like that if you don't understand one thing then the whole lecture is useless. So just don't quit and be with me till the end. Okay. So let's see what are we going to build today. So this is a game. If I start, then you see these are some moles appearing from random holes. Okay. You see these are some moles appearing from random holes. See? Okay. So this is a game where some moles would keep peeping out from random location, and what we need to do is we need to hit them, and hitting them will give us a point. So basically our target is to maximize our score in the game duration, which is let's say 10 seconds. So our target is to maximize our score in 10 seconds. Okay. So yeah, that was our game, and this is really simple game. So let's start our tutorial by making some observation, because it's really important to have some vision of have vision of the code you are going to write. Okay. So first thing we'll be needing is let's first see what are these. So these are 6 locations, right? So to begin the game, what we need to do is we need to select a random time. First, leave it. First, we need to select a mole out of which the mole would peep out. Okay. Then we need to select a random duration for which the mole would appear before us. The third thing we need is to handle the click action, right? So as soon as the user clicks, we need to do some updations like increase the score, reflect the score on leaderboard. So these things, these are the main things we need to handle in our code, right? So let's have a walkthrough of the HTML code we have. So you can see this is the code we have provided you. If you couldn't open the things or you couldn't set up the things, just don't worry, just look, just pay attention here. Okay, and everything will be clear in some time. So this is the HTML file we gave to you, and this is the style.css, basically CSS we provided you. So let's see how our HTML code looks. So we have this HTML tag. This HTML contains 2 tags, head and second is this body till here. This body in turn has these elements, which is first is h1, second is a div. So the code you write in the HTML part is visualized as a tree structure by the browser. Okay. Voice muffled. What's problem? आदित्य कुछ दिक्कत हो रही है क्या मेरी वॉइस में? भटनागर?
नहीं, वॉइस इज फाइन। ज्यादा
अभी किसी का क्वेरी आया ना, अभी मेरे को ऐसे पॉपअप आया कि वॉइस इज मुफल्ड, तो पता
आई
नहीं
गेस
सबको प्रॉब्लम हो रहा है क्या कि किसी एक को ही हो रहा है? ऋषि सही आ रही है क्या बात?
हाँ ठीक आ रही है मेरे को।
चलो ओके, लेट्स कंटिन्यू. सो प्लीज जिसको भी दिक्कत हो रही है प्लीज वंस चेक योर कनेक्शन. So we'll continue. So we were looking at DOM tree. So what is DOM tree? Adit explained you a bit about it in the presentation. So let's see in our code what it actually is. So the code you write in the HTML part, so this code basically till here, is visualized as a tree structure by the browser. Okay. So the top level node, this HTML node, is the root node, and this has two children. One is head, the second is. This in turn has some more children. First is h1, then this whole div is children of body. Then if you consider this div, then this has six children. First is whole one, then whole two, whole three. The whole, by whole I mean the div having class whole one, whole two, whole three, till whole six. If you consider individual wholes, then these they have their own children. They have their own child, which is a mole. So let's see how this document object model looks like. So this is our document, and this is our root element, which is basically this HTML tag. You see, it has two children. First is head, and second is body. So you see, this is our head till here, and this is our body till here, right? So this root element has two children. Okay. Let me. Okay. What's the variable? So coming to the body, you see this body, this is our body, and this body has three children. So here we have one, this two, and all these children. These children in turn have their own children. Okay, so that's how the browser visualizes the HTML code we write. Okay, so how is it helpful to us? So using this tree structure, it basically creates object for every node. So we have an object which points to every node. We can just extract object using some by writing some JavaScript, which can help us modify some properties of the DOM dynamically, right? So let's just start by having some examples. So we'll be defining some variables which we'll be using in the game frequently. So first is, let's say, const holds. Oh, let me explain you what are selectors. So selectors are the functions which we use to select elements from the DOM tree based on their properties. For example, if you want to select these elements, because like they have class whole, fine. They have two classes, whole and whole one. Similarly, this div has two classes, whole and whole two. So if you want to select all the elements in the DOM tree which have class whole in them, you can just ask this selector to do this. And how do we do it? So we just ask the document, but the query selector all basically selects all the elements having that specific property. In query selector, just query selector selects the first element having that property. So the query selector all, and what we want to select is elements having the property whole. So this dot signifies that we want to select all the divs which have class whole in them. So I'll be showing that these are the divs. These six divs would be selected when we execute this line of code. Okay, so let's save. Okay, let me zoom. Little bit. Does this font work fine? Is this visible? Anyone please confirm? Okay, so let's begin. So first variable we have is whole. So please keep in mind that whenever you edit the code, you'll have to save it, and to get this code reflected to your browser, you'll have to refresh the window. So if I want this code to be reflected on my window, you just have to refresh the window. Okay. So here I have, let's see, what does this variable holes contain. You see, I defined the variable holes here, and I can see it on the console. For those of you who don't know how to get to console, so let's see. This is your browser window. Just press F12, and you might be seeing this kind of window. Then go to console. Okay. Just by going console, here you can write all the JavaScript you want, and it basically executes the JavaScript code snippets. Okay. So we saved our code, refreshed our window. Let's see what does our holes variable contain. You can see the holes variable basically contains a list of nodes having class whole in them, right? Here. So this div contains whole class, this div contains whole class, this, and this. So this whole variable is a list of these six nodes which point to the divs containing class whole, right? So let's define one more variable. The second variable we'll be needing is const moles. So let's select the same way we selected whole document.query selector all the divs containing class mole in them. Okay. So what is this? What would this mole variable contain? It would contain these divs because this still has class mole, this still has class mole, this, 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 and this. So these six divs has class mole in them. So this selector will be selecting them. Okay. So let's see. Let's save this and refresh this. Now you see moles. You can see it gives us a list of divs having class mole in them. Okay, this, 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 and this. Works fine, I guess. Third thing we'll be needing is const board. This is element which we'll be using to reflect the score of the player. So we have leaderboard here. So you see here will be reflecting the score of the user. Now you can see it like this element has class score in this. So we'll be using this class score to select it. So just provide this information to query. Now that we have just one element, we don't have to use all. We can just select. We can just use query selector and give it and ask it to select the element which has class score in it. So dot. Okay. So let's refresh our window and see. You can see it has selected scoreboard, and which element does it point to? This is the element which it points to. Now, how will be using it? So let's see. If you wanna modify or you wanna like edit any property of this element, you can just ask this object scoreboard dot say for example you wanna update the score to 10. So just you ask that scoreboard dot text content, you mark it, you assign it 10. You see the value gets updated to 10. Okay. So that's how we'll be using it. Now that we have some functions with us, begin defining some functions we'll be using. The first function we'll be needing is function. That's how we declare function, the keyword function, and then the name of the function. So let's name it random number time. So what this function does is it takes two arguments. First is min and second is max. Let's first see what we aim to what we aim to achieve from this function. Okay, so we want this function to return a random number in this range. So we just provide this function a range, a min value and a max value, and we want it to return as a random number in that range. Okay, so for this we'll have to understand a couple of functions. So JavaScript provides us a globally accessible object called math. So this is a math object which contains some useful mathematical function like this absolute value is basically modulo function. It gives you the modulo of the value you provide to. Then there is a cos which is inverse cos, a cos h. Then there's ceil, there is cos h, exponential function, floor, and there's a whole lot of function you can explore. What we need as of now is a function random from this list. So let's see what this function random does. So whenever you invoke this function random from math object, it returns you a random real value. Real value. Please note the word real value in the range 0 and 1. And it never returns you 1. Okay. So it returns your number in range 0, 1. And that's completely random. So every time you invoke it, it returns you a different random number. Right. So let's, but yeah, we know that this number is between 0 to 1. Okay, so let's extend this to solve our purpose. So let me point it out. So we know that 0 is less or equal to math plus random. Okay, we know this inequality holds because that's what our function does. Now let's say we multiply this inequality with a value max minus min. So this inequality becomes math with random star max minus min, and right hand side becomes max minus min. Okay, now if we add a value of min to this inequality, then this inequality becomes this math random star max minus min plus min is less than max minus min plus min. So basically we added the value min to this equation here, here, and here. So this max, this min and minus min gets cancelled out, and we have this number in the range we wanted it to be, right? So let's just return this number, return math dot random star max minus min plus min. So let's now test this function in console, save this script, refresh our browser so that it loads the new code, and let's test our function. So random number, let's say we want a value between 20 to 30. You can see it gives us a real number in this range. If we invoke it again, it gives us a different real number. Invoke it again, different value. Every time you invoke it, it gives you different random number. But we want this function to return us an integer. Okay, because I'll explain you why later. We want this function to return us an integral value. So we again use a function provided to us by the math library, math object, the math.flow. So what this does is you provide it any real number, 2.204, anything. It just truncates its decimal part and returns you the integral part. You see, like for example, I do this 4.2.5. You see, it returns us the integral part of that number. We just return the integral part of this object. No, I'm sorry, math.flow. Okay, so now let's refresh our window and test this function again. So random number between, let's say, 20 to 30 again. So it gives us an integer 24. If you invoke this again, 29, again 26. Fine. So we now have a function which gives us a random integer in the range we feed to it. Okay. So next function we need to be function random whole. So what this function is, it has a list of whole which we selected earlier from our document. Okay, so it takes the list of whole and it returns us a random whole from random element from that list. Okay, so this is really simple task. To do this, we just have to select a random index of the array and just return the element corresponding to that index. For those of you who don't know what an index is, so basically, let's say we have an array of integers 1, 2, sorry, 2, 3, 4. So every array is basically collection of objects. So for every array, let's say this the length of the array be L. So all the elements of the array are numbered from 0 to L minus 1, and this number is called the index of that element. And what is the use of that index? The index is used to access the element. Let's say, so basically this number has 0 index, this has 1, this has 2, and this has 3. So if you want to access third element, then its index would be 3 minus 2, 1. Basically position of the element minus 1. So array of third element would be index 2. So array 2, you can see it returns us 3. So that's the use of index. So to select a random hole from the list of holes, we just have to select a random index. Random index. Okay? So we can use this function we just made here. So let's select from let index be a random number in range 0, holes dot length. Okay, so you can see this index would be selected randomly from 0 to holes dot length, and it will never be equal to holes dot length, right? Because you can see here inequality strictly length, right? So we have an index. Let's say this is the hole corresponding to this index idx. Okay, so let's see how this function works. Return idx comma hole. Okay, so let's refresh our browser window. Let's refresh our browser window. Yeah, so random hole. Okay. Sorry. Random hole. We have function random hole. Let's getting reflected there. Oh, sorry, I added random. Here we have sorry, mistake. So let's see how this works under the random holes. You see, it gives us a random index and the element corresponding to that index. And you see, this is the element it gives us. Okay. If I invoke it again, it gives me a different integer and a different random value. Again. Okay. Invoke it again. Okay. Now, you see, it can give us the same number more than once. Let's see. Invoke it again. 3, 0, 2, 0, 3, 4. You can see it gives us same value more than one. Okay. Since it's completely random and the number of options we have is pretty small, it's fairly justified that it gives us same number more than one consecutively. Okay, so which is something we don't really want, right? Because we don't want a mole to just keep coming out from the same hole again and again. Okay, so to fix this, let's maintain a variable last hole. So let's maintain a variable let last hole. So this variable keeps track of the hole which we had in the previous one. Okay, so this keeps track of the hole which from which the mole peeped out in the last one. Okay, and we just add a snippet of code here. While the hole we got, the hole is equal to last hole. So basically we have our last hole, and if the current hole which we have is equal to the hole which we got in the last term, then we need to repeat this process. Fine, because we don't want this hole to be same as the last hole. So to do this, we just copy this code and paste it here. Okay. You see, we just select an index again randomly and assign the hole to it. Okay, so this loop continues to work till the moment we get a hole different from the hole we got in the last one. So when we come out of this, it's certain that we have a hole which is not going to off. Oh, sorry. But okay. So then okay. Okay. We have this hole. Okay. So what this snippet does is it compares the current hole with the last hole, and if the hole is equal to the last hole, then it picks a random index again and assigns the hole variable which we declared here to this the value at this index, right? And as we come out of this hole, it's certain. Like how do I explain it slowly? I don't know, but it's very simple. That when I come out of this hole, it's certain that the hole value, this hole, is not equal to this last hole value. Because if it would have been equal to this, then this loop would not have been broken, right? So it's certain that the hole I have is different from the hole I had last time. Okay, so I'll just return the hole I have. Let's see this function. So I'll have to assign. So let's assign last hole equal to hole. Why did I do this? Because the hole I have now, the hole I have now will be acting as last hole for the next term. You're getting it? So basically, जो mole अभी peep out किया, that would be the last hole for next term. So just update the last hole variable to hole to return this hole. Okay. So let's test this random hole function. Random hole, which takes the list of holes. You see, it returned us this date. This date. You see, it returned us this date. If I invoke this again, it returned me this date, second one. Invoke it again, this date. Invoke it again, this date. So you can see every time I invoke it, first time it returns me this, then this, then this, then this. So every time you invoke it, it's certain because we have written the code that way. It's certain that it will be giving us a different random hole again and again. Okay, every time we call it. So let's just analyze what do we have till now. Okay, so we have just made a function random number which takes two values min and max and returns a random number in this range. And this random number is an integer. We have made sure that this is an integer. The second function we made is random hole, which basically selects a random index and returns us the hole corresponding to that index. And if that hole is equal to the hole we got in last term, then it repeats the process again till the moment we get a hole different from the last term. And as soon as we have a hole different from the last term, we assign it to last hole and return that hole. I hope this is clear. Okay. Math.random is a member function. I didn't get the question. You can that's member of the object. What are you trying to ask me? Oh, you can ask it after the lecture. Okay. So let's now move on. So the next function we have a function peep out. Right? So what will this function do? So we have a random hole, okay, out of which we want a mole to come out. So this random hole, we want like we want a mole to come out from this random hole, right? And uh, for what amount of time? That amount of time has to be selected randomly. Okay, so let's just have some variables. Let's say we have a time in range random number. Let's say we want a mole to be out for 300 milliseconds to 1000 for any duration between 300 milliseconds to 1000 milliseconds. So I'll be explaining you shortly why am I using the time duration in milliseconds. The second thing we need is a random hole. So we'll just use the function we just made, random hole, which gives us a random hole from the list of holes. So let's see this on console. Time on a hole. So let's just see this on console. See क्या करता है ये अभी तक. So let's refresh the browser window. If I invoke the function peepout, you can see it returns as a random number in this way. As we are getting, you asked why are we using the while loop? Okay, so we use the while loop because it's possible that this since this value is this the random index we are generating, it's completely random, and we have just 6 options to select: 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So it's fairly possible that it gives us same number more than one, right? Let's say we comment this out, we comment this out, comment this out. Let's see this random whole function. Let me refresh the window. Random whole holes. Okay, return index. Okay, I'll explain it. Don't worry. Let me refresh the browser. So you see random whole. Okay, we can leave this. Let's the job whole. You see, it returned us 2. Okay, if I invoke this function again, it returned me 5, then again 4, 4, 5, sorry, 2, 0, 4, 5, 2, 2, 1. ओके, तो यहाँ पे देखो कि ये ऐसा भी हो सकता है बिकॉज वी जस्ट हैव 6 ऑप्शंस, तो इट मे रिटर्न अस सेम वैल्यू कंसेक्यूटिवली, तो इट रिटर्न अस 2 कंसेक्यूटिवली. तो फाइनली गेम में होगा क्या कि वी आर सिलेक्टिंग दीज होल्स टू मेक द मोल पीप आउट ऑफ देम. सो इसमें से क्या हो रहा होगा, बेसिकली मोल बाहर आ रहा होगा. तो गेम में क्या होगा, रैंडमली एक बार सिलेक्ट हुआ ये मोल, फिर अगेन इसमें से ही आया, फिर मान लो फिर एक बार सेम वैल्यू सिलेक्ट हो गई तो फिर अगेन इसमें से ही आएगा. So that's something we don't want, right? That's why we are adding this while loop so that it gives us a random whole but different. But it has to be different from the one we had in last one. Okay. If you don't get it, please just you can just keep this part, just mark it down. I'll explain it later. Okay. Not a big deal, and it doesn't affect our game much. So we were on our function peepout where we selected a random time in this range. We selected a random hole using this function. Okay, and we were testing it. See how does it go. So let's do this. Let's peep out. And we want oh yeah, thanks. So peep out. Okay, so what does it return? You can see it returns us number in this range, 300 to 1000, right? And it returns us a hole. Hole is basically div having class hole in it. Okay, so it returns us this hole. If I execute this peep out function again, it returns me different time value, different duration of time, and a different hole. Again a different hole, again a different duration of time. Okay, so now that we have uh, the time for which the mole will stay out and the hole out of which the mole would peep out. Let's see what we have next. So let's learn how do we modify the classes of elements dynamically using JavaScript. Okay, so let's say we have a variable let hole equal to hole 0. So which element does this hole point to? So this hole points to this div. Okay, in browser this div. First div containing the class hole. That's what this hole points to. Okay, if we want to know which classes does this div contain, so we just do div the whole dot class list. This is a variable which contains all the classes this div has. You can see it gives us the list of whole and whole one. We have and that's what we have in our HTML code. So it has a class whole and a class whole one. Okay, So what if we want to add a class to it? Okay, so to do that, we just invoke a method dot class list dot add. This method is provided to us by the list. So if I add, for example, img class, say for example, I want to add a class img to that div, and I just invoke this method, and let's see in inspector, you can see it has the class img included in it. Okay, let's see again how do we do it. I just invoke this method whole but class list but add img. So it just adds the class img to it, and as soon as it adds the class img to it, if we would have mentioned, for example, this is our css file, if we would have mentioned something like what img and some property, so the moment we add the class to it, it inherits all the property mentioned for that class from the css. Okay, so yeah, and now let's see how do we remove it. Removing is just same as adding. So we just call remove method. If we remove it, now you see in inspector the img class has vanished. Okay, so that's how we dynamically add classes to DOM elements using JS. Okay, so let's use this. So let's say we want our peep out function to make the mole peep out of that hole. Okay, so we just add a class list with add. If we add the class up to it, so what does it do? It selects a hole and then it adds the class up to it. And as soon as we add the class up, it basically inherits all the properties we have mentioned in our class. So you can see in up class, we have mentioned this property. So this property is applied to that element at the moment when we add class up to it. Okay. So let's see this function, how this function works in console. Let's refresh our window, invoke peep out. You see, it selected a random hole. Okay, so it selected a random hole and it just added this class up to this hole. Okay, so what if I want this mole to go back in? I just hole. This is first, this is second, so its index is one. Folder class list dot remove. If I remove the class up which I added here, then in this you can see it went back in. Okay, if I execute the function again, peep out function, then it again selects a random hole and adds class up to it, which makes the mole peep out of that hole. I hope this is clear to you. Yeah, so now you see this mole uh, stays out forever, right? So what do we do now? We want this mole to go back in after this duration of time, because that's what we aimed earlier, that the moles keep coming out of random holes for a random duration of time, and this is the duration of time we want it to be out. Okay, so to do this, we want something that after time, this duration of time, this much duration of time, we want to do something so that it removes the class up from it, and removing the class up forces the mole to go back in. Okay, so how do we do it? We do it using a function called set timeout. So let's see how this set timeout function works. So set timeout function is a function provided to us by JavaScript. Okay, so how this works is it takes two arguments. First is a function, that is a function. Okay, and second is the time in milliseconds. Please note that it takes time in milliseconds. So for example, you want to do something. Okay, so what it does is it basically invokes the function you gave it after this amount of time. Let's say we want to invoke a function in 2000 milliseconds. That's 2 seconds. After 2 seconds, we want a browser to alert us that hey, 2 seconds have passed. Okay. So as soon as we invoke this function, exactly after 2 seconds, this set timeout function will call this function, which would alert us, let's say 2 seconds have passed. So let's see how it works. So 1, 2, you see, we got an alert, let's say 2 seconds have passed. Okay, so that's how we use a function. We just have to pass the function which we want this set timeout to invoke after this much amount of time. So let's just use it here. Set timeout. Let's give it a function. Let's say it does some after this amount of time. So we want our mole to go back in after this amount of time. So we just add a timeout. भाई इस time के बाद you'll have to execute these lines of code, right? And what do we wanna execute? We want our whole to go back. We want our mole to go back in, and how do we do it? We just remove the class up from it. Okay, so hold the class list, but remove do taking no empty function. No, it's not empty. I was just defining it later. It's not empty. You can pass it empty function, but that's completely meaningless. Why would you pass an empty function? Okay, so we just remove a class up. So what do we do here? We select a random time. We select a random whole, and as soon as we select a random whole, we just add a class up to it. And this class, and addition of this class up brings out the mole from that hole. And after this time has elapsed, we tell it to execute this line, which basically removes the class up, and hence the mole goes back in. Right? So let's see how this peep out function works. So let me refresh the window. Please keep refreshing your window when you edit the code and save the code. So let's see peep out. You saw it selected a random hole, then it selected a random duration, and the mole peeped out of it, and then after this amount of time, it went back in. Okay, so yeah, but now, yeah, okay. So let's just make this peep out function more continuous. So what peep out does is, it basically triggers the motion of a mole. Okay, so just keep in mind that what does peep out do? It triggers the motion of a mole. It makes it come out, and then it forces it to go back in after a certain amount of time, which is this. Okay, so we want this to be continuous, right? We want that as soon as one mole goes in, another mole comes out from another location, right? To do this, as soon as we force the mole to go back in, we just want some other mole to be selected and execute whole of this code for that mole. Okay, so that's what our peep out function does. So we just add, we just call it recursively, right? So this might take you time to understand, but just give it a thought that what we are doing is people. Let's just make the meaning of the function. That what people does is it selects a random hole, selects a random time, and it triggers the motion of that mole for that duration of time, right? And as soon as that goes in, what we want is we want to trigger the motion of some other mole, right? So we just invoke this function again, which takes a random mole again and triggers its motion. Triggers its motion. Right? Let's just test this function and refresh the window. If I execute peep out, you see it selects a random location again and again, and this mole goes in, some other comes out, this goes in, some other comes out, and this continues endlessly. Right? But please pay attention here that we don't want our game to be endless, right? Our game has some certain duration. We want our game to end after, let's say, for example, 10 seconds. So we want our game to end after 10 seconds. So how do we do it? After 10 seconds, we just don't first we just cease to trigger the motion of other hole, right? So let's define a variable that is over, which basically tracks the state of the game. It basically tracks whether the game is over or not. So initially game is over. Initially game is not over. So this variable is false. Okay. So how do we use this variable here? So we want that if the game is over, then just don't trigger the motion of other mode. Okay. So we just add a if statement here. If not is game over. That means if a game is not over, then just trigger this function. But if game is over, then this line doesn't get executed. Okay. So if this variable is true, then this whole becomes false, and this line is not executed. That means if our game is over, then don't trigger the motion of next mode. Okay. So let's now see how does this work. First, okay, just leave it. Let's first see how we use our isGame function, isGame over function. So let's say we trigger keep out. You see, this will continue for an infinite time. Okay, but if I set isGame over, which is currently false, if I set it to true, then you see motion ceases to exist. The moles don't come out and everything stops. Okay, so that's what this line does is that if this variable is game over is not true, you just stop. Don't trigger the motion of the next one. So you see this variable is game over is sufficient to stop the game. So whenever we need to stop the game, we just have to set this variable to true. That means we just want at any moment, if we want that our game should stop now, then we'll do, we'll just set this variable is game over to true, which would basically stop the moles from coming out. Okay, so now let's move ahead. Okay. Now, should we analyze this function again before? Okay, so if some of you might have not got the idea what are we doing in this function, so let's see it again. Let's analyze this function again. What this does is line by line. So this function peep out. Let me write it here. So triggers the motion of modes. Okay, so this peep out function triggers the motion of the modes. What it does is it selects a random duration, it selects a random hole, it brings out the mole by adding the class up to it, then it sets a timeout that after this amount of time, just remove the class up from it. That means push that mole back in. Okay, and if game is not over, that means if a game is still running or our game is in running phase, then trigger the motion of another mode. And if our game is over, then don't. Okay, so that's what our function does. So let's now move on. Next function we want to make a function start game. So what this function does is it's basically like it has mostly initializations like setting the variables to 0, updating the scoreboard to the initial value. So let's see what our start game does. So one more variable will be needed is let's see. So score equals score of player. So let's set score to 0 as soon as we start the game. Let's set if game over to false because while starting the game is not over. Let's reflect the score 0 on our scoreboard. So this is our scoreboard. Let's reflect scoreboard. Do it. Text content. is equal to score. Okay, so we have initialized the thing. Now what we need to do, we need to trigger the motion of the modes. Okay, you see, how do we trigger the motion of the modes? We trigger it using the function we just made. Okay, so we just call this function. So let's just save this. Let's refresh the window. Okay. And if I execute start game function, then you see the motion of the modes has triggered. And do we have to use multi-threading? No, man. This is really simple game. No multi-threading. Okay, so you see this basically triggers the motion of our modes, but this motion is endless, right? It never ends. And what our aim is, like we aim to end this after, let's say, for 10 seconds. Let's say the duration of our game is 10 seconds. So we want the motion of the modes to cease after 10 seconds. So we just saw that if we want to do something after a specific amount of time, how do we do it? We do it using set timeout. Okay, so set timeout does this for us. It basically does it basically runs a function which we provided after a specific amount of time. So we just add a set timeout, which take where we pass a function where we'll be doing something. And after how many seconds? 10,000 milliseconds. 10,000 milliseconds. So we want our game to end after 10,000 milliseconds. Now let's see how do we end our game. Okay, I told you earlier here that how do we end our game? To end our game, it's sufficient to mark our variable is game over. Let's see here on the console. If I set is game over to true, you see the motion of the mode will cease to. Okay, so now modes are not moving and everything has just stopped. So to stop the game, we just have to set the is game over variable to true, and that will do the work. Okay, so what did we do here? Let's analyze it again. We set the score to 0. We set the is game over variable to false. That means a game has started. We update the scoreboard. That means we update the text content. Okay, and then we trigger the motion of the modes, right? And after triggering, we just add a set timeout function, which basically, yeah, we add a set timeout function, which basically executes this snippet of code after this amount of time. That's our game duration. So what this does is, it basically sets this game over variable to true after 10 seconds. I think this is clear to you. So let's check how does this work. If we refresh a function to start game, if I invoke this, you see moles keep coming out. Okay, let's wait for 10 seconds. You see 10 seconds have elapsed and our is game variable, let's say, is game over. It has been set to true, and so the motion of the mode has stopped. Okay, so yeah, that's the start game function. Now, our coming to the last step of the game, what we need is, as we saw in the game, if this is the game is that if we click, let's say if we click the mode, you see it updates the score, right? So now what we want to do is to handle the click action of the user, right? So whenever a user clicks a mode, we want the score to get updated. We want to do like कुछ चीजें करनी है हमें. Okay, we want we have some things, we have some updations, we have some ये कुछ variables वगैरह assign करने होंगे. We have some things to do, and which we want to do as the user hits the mode. Okay, so for this You'll have to know a couple of things first. Okay, so the first thing is event listeners. What are event listeners? So I told you about DOM. Okay, so this is our DOM, document object model. This is our DOM. Okay, and these are the nodes in the DOM. Okay, and if you see in our code, then this, yeah, how about we call people function sadly, it recursively, so I can see it. Actually, I'm not able to see your chat properly, right? Screen sharing is not easy to see questions. Okay, you just post it on Discord channel, or you can ask me after the workshop. Okay, so sorry for not being able to clear it at the moment. Okay, so where are we? So event listeners. So I explained that we have these elements. So this is an element. This is an element. This is an element. So every element, basically every opening and a closing tag constitutes an element. Okay, and these elements are represented by a separate node in DOM tree. Okay, so where was our DOM tree? Yeah, here. So it will be represented here as some node. Okay, so what are events? Okay. Events are basically like this. So in DOM, every node, that means every element, this, this, maybe this, and every element in this tree knows exactly what's happening with it. Like if you click it, it knows it. If you hover over it, it knows it. If you focus on it, it knows it. And there is a really long list of actions which are tracked by these elements, right? So using event listeners, what you can do, you can just ask that node to execute some function, right? Just like we did in timeout, we asked the timeout to execute this function after this amount of time. So in event listeners, you can ask the specific node that by if you detect that someone clicked on you, then please execute this function. So what does it take? Let's say we have a variable that whole is equal to whole 0. Okay, you see whole points to this node. Okay, whole points to this node. Okay, whole points to this node. Now let's say I want to do something whenever user clicks on this whole. Okay, I just add event listener, and that's how you add. So whole dot add event listener adds it, and how what this event listener takes it takes the type of event you want to track. So we want to track click event, and whenever this element is clicked, what we want to do, let's say we want to execute this function. So it takes two arguments, the type of event you want to track and the function you want to execute as soon as that event is detected. That's fine. So let's say we want to alert the user, let's say you click me. Okay. If I add this event listener, so you see, if I click this hole, it gives me a pop-up that hey, you clicked me. If I click this hole, it gives me a pop-up that you clicked me. But if I click these holes, that I am clicking these holes, then it won't give me a pop-up because I have attached an event listener to this hole, not to these holes. They are firing events, but we haven't caught them. Okay, so we just uh, like whenever you perform any action, an event is dispatched. It's just that you want to track them or not. Okay, so we just added an event listener. Ki bhai, if this event, if you track this event, just execute this function. Okay, so let's now have a look at um, okay, so let's now have a look at event object. So whenever an event is detected, an event object is fired by event dispatcher. What this event object contains, let's see what this contains. be able to explain it properly. Console.log event E. Okay. So what we do, we just add event listener click to this hole, that if you detect a click, then just execute this function. What does this function do? It basically console logs the event object has been passed. Okay, so who passes this event object? This is passed to this function by this hole. Okay, this node passes this event object which contains some useful information to this function. Okay, so let's just see what does this event object contain. If I click this, it executes the earlier event listener, which to which in which we mentioned that you should alert the user. And in second thing, it console logs, basically logs this event object on console. So let's see what info does this event object provide us. It gives us some boolean values, some numbers, some more boolean, some numbers. It gives us the target element, so the element in the DOM which is clicked. Yeah. So what does this boolean, let's say this is alt key, it basically tells whether the alt key was pressed or not when the click, when this object was clicked. Okay, so there is one more variable called control. So you see this is control key. It basically tells you whether control key was pressed or not when the click event was fired. Okay, there is one more useful boolean which is trusted. This is trusted, so it's true. If this variable is true when the event is generated by user. Okay, so if any event is generated by user section, then it's trusted, else not, because I'll be showing you that you can generate events, you can dispatch events using the methods provided to you by JS. So for example, I have reference to the first hole. So this is hole. If I execute click method of this hole, then you'll see the pop-up coming, because it will it will just fake the click of the user. Okay, so if I execute this, you see it the browser acted like the hole was clicked. Okay, so you can fake the click using JavaScript. It did all those things which it would have done if we would have clicked it. Okay, so these things, we'll be using these things. So let's for now attach an event listener. Let's say we have a function handle play. Let's say this function does something. Here goes the code, and we add an event listener, so modes. So whose click event do we wanna listen? We want to listen the click events for the modes, right? We want our players score to be updated if a mole is clicked. So we just add an event listener to these moles. And how do we do it? We just create our mole and we pass a function. Okay, this function, I'll be explaining what this for each function does. Don't worry. We just add an event listener, mole that add event listener. Okay, so what does which event does this event listener listen to? So click event, and if a mole is clicked, then what do? We just call handle click. Okay, so we have defined handle click here. So what does this line say? It basically says that mole, for every mole, attach an event listener to it, which tracks the event of click, and as soon as the player clicks the mole, just invoke this function. Okay, this function has an object attached to it. So now let's see whether this function is okay. So let's see what this for each do. So what for each does is basically takes a function. This is a function. It takes a function as an argument, which it passes with the element of the array. So for each element in this list, it invokes this function. Okay. So let's see an example. Let's say we have an array of integer. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. If we wanna just add one to this integer, so let's say array first for each. Let's say we pass a function which is passed with individual values. So it runs this function on each of these elements. Okay, so it will be passed with this element. Let's say it has element, and what we do is we alert element. So we say, hey, I am a. Okay. You see, I am, am identity. Oh, identity. Okay. So if I invoke it, so what does it say? It says, hey, I am one. It invoked this function for element 1. If I click OK, then it invoked the same function for element 2. If I click OK, then it invoked the same function for 3, then same function for 4. So for each does what for each does, if it takes a function and invokes it for every element of the array. Okay, I think this is clear. So now we have an event listener attached to each of the nodes. Okay, so let's see whether our event listener works. So let's console log. So hey, you clicked a node. So as soon as the user clicks the node, this function will be invoked and it will print on console that hey, you clicked the node. Fair enough. Let's refresh our window. Let's see if I let's just start our game. Refreshing. You see, if I invoke start game, the modes keep coming out, and if I click them, or if I click them, you see, if I'm clicking them, this handle click function is being invoked by the event listener as soon as it detects a click on the node, and it console logs that hey, you clicked the node, right? So now that we are in a position to handle the click of the user, what let's see what do we have to do when we detect a click. So when we know that our mole has been clicked, so what we'll do, we'll just increment the score. We'll reflect this score on the scoreboard. Okay. Okay. We just reflect this score on the scoreboard. The third thing we do is okay. So let's just test this first. Let's move this line. Refresh our window. Now it taking some second. Okay. So if I trigger start game, and if I trigger, you can see if I click the mole, then my score is getting updated. You see, my score is getting updated. Okay. Yeah. So now we are almost done. We need to fix one more thing. So as I showed you that you can fake the click using JavaScript. So let's say I have, let's say, हाँ हाँ प्रॉब्लम आएगा. हेलो ऋषि, आवाज नहीं आ रही क्या मेरी? हेलो 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 ऋषि,
हाँ, नहीं नहीं, आवाज आ रही है.
आवाज आ रही है ना? कुछ बोल रहा है क्या?
पता नहीं, अभी किसी और की आवाज आई थी शायद, आई गेस.
अच्छा, मेरे को लगा ऋषि कुछ बोल रहा है। चलो ठीक है, मैं कंटिन्यू कर रहा हूँ।
अच्छा,
ओके, ऋषि को बोल दो, मेरे को लगा कुछ
ओके
बोल
ओके
रहा है।
ओके ओके।
तो या लेट्स that is what we might to the mole. Okay, moles. Let's say he has the reference to the mole, and if he executes this function, it is provided to us by J. Okay, if he executes this function, then you can see the scoreboard gets updated. You see, the scoreboard gets updated. Now, not Rishi, Rishi,
हाँ मतलब
Rishi,
कुछ क्या हुआ?
कुछ उसकी नॉइस आ रही है। अभी सही, अभी तो नहीं आ रही ना, मेरे को एकदम बिल्कुल नॉइस आई।
अच्छा अच्छा ओके।
ठीक है, उसके मैसेज कर दूंगा। ओके, सो यू कैन सी इफ we have the reference to a mole, and if we execute this fake click, then our score gets updated automatically. So using this fake click, we can achieve an infinite score, right? So this makes our game meaningless, क्योंकि मतलब कोई भी आएगा, थोड़ा सा भी नॉलेज है, then they will just click, they'll just fake the click and attain any score. So to fix this, as I showed you, we have in this event object a property, as I showed you earlier, e dot is trusted. So this boolean e dot is trusted. This boolean is true when the event which is caught by this event listener. So this is true when the event caught is actually generated by a user, and is false if the event is script generated or event is faked by a user. So let's see if we detect any kind of mischief. So what do you want to do? You want to set the score to 0. I'm sorry. We want to set the score to 0. We update the leaderboard dot text content. So, and we want to alert the user that, hey, you think you are smarter than me. And to punish him for his mischief, we just end the game. And as I mentioned earlier, to end the game, all we need to do is just set the is game over variable to true. We just set this is game over variable to true and return the function. Okay. So now let's see how this works. So if we let's refresh, save, and refresh the browser. So if we invoke the start game function, you see modes are coming out. If I click them, let me just highlight this one. If okay, let's start the game again. Let's say we start the game. Okay, so you see it's updating the content. Okay, updating my score. But if I fake click, oh shit, game was already. Let's start the game again. Start the game again. I have started the game, and if I try to fake the click, mode 0 dot click. Okay, so if I try to fake the click, it gives me an alert that, hey, you think you are smarter than me, and ends the game. So the motion ceases to stop. Okay, so that basically ends this tutorial, and that completes the tutorial. Let's just go over the code again. So how did we start? We started by declaring three main variables which we'll be using throughout. First is whole, second is modes, third is codebook. Holes has the list of nodes which have class whole in them. Moles has the list of uh, elements which have class mole in them. And scoreboard points to a bit which has the score in it. So in the DOM, these are the things. So this div is our hole, and this div inside it is our load. So these variable hold those lists, and this our scoreboard. Then we had a last four variable. Let's go function wise. So first we have a random number function which follows these three inequalities and gives us a random number in range min comma max. Okay. The second function we have is random hole function. Basically takes the list of the whole, selects a random number and
वो चीज अपना हम बना के देगी कभी नहीं कि
hello Rishi, you muted नहीं भाई. Call दे देते हैं. Just wait a minute, guys, please. Okay, so let's just move on. So what this function does is it basically selects a random index from in this range and gives us the whole corresponding to that index. And if this whole is same whole that we got in the previous term, then we repeat this process. Okay, just a minute. ऋषि भाई म्यूट कर ले, तो म्यूटेड नहीं.
अरे तो
म्यूटेड है नहीं है तो
क्या क्या क्या
म्यूटेड नहीं है तो रिमूव कर लो वहां पे.
अच्छा
Okay, so sorry for inconvenience. Yeah, so this selects a random index in range 0 to holds dot length, and this is never equal to holds dot length. It basically ranges from 0 to length minus 1. And this variable contains the element corresponding to that index. And if we got the whole, which is same as the whole we got in the last term, then we just repeat this process. And as soon as we come out of this while loop, it's certain that the whole we have in hand is a different whole from the last whole we had. So we just return this whole and assign this whole to last whole because it will act as last whole for the next one. So this function, if speaking broadly, returns as a whole, returns as a random whole, which is different every time. Okay. Let's move on to the next function. So we have now a function peepout. What does this function do? It selects a random duration of time. It selects a random whole, and then it, as soon as it selects a random whole, it makes the mole come out of that. Okay, it just adds the class up to it, due to which the mole comes out. And after this duration of time, we remove the class whole from it so that the whole goes back, the mole goes back in. And if our game is not over, if our game is still running, we just trigger the motion of some other mole. Fine. So this basically, what this basically does is it triggers the motion of the moles till our game is not over. Please explain class list. Oh, look, you can see this is a div. So using selector, let's say I want to select this div. So let's say I select this div. Let's go is equal to document but where we query selector dot hold. So we have this div. Okay, so it returns us first div. Now, if you want to know that what are the classes which this div contains, so you just you can just do this using a variable defined in this node, which is class list. So you can see it returns you a list of classes that node has included in it. You can see the first node has class whole in whole one. So whole that class list returns you a list of classes that whole has. Now, what if you want to add a class to this element whole dynamically using JS. So how would you do? Whole dot class list dot add. This list has a method add which can be used to add any class. So for example, you want to add a class XYZ to this div. So you just invoke this method, and here you can see it has a class XYZ in it. Okay. And in a similar way, you can remove the classes from it. So remove. If you do this and come here back again, you see the class XYZ has been removed from this element. Okay. I hope class list, how do we use class list? Class list is clear to you. So we will on this function. What this does is it basically removes the class up from it, and if game is not over, that means our game is in running state, then it triggers the motion of some other mole. So a mole comes out, after some duration of time it goes back in, and if game is not over, then it selects a random mole and makes the mole peep out of that hole. Fine. So that's what this function does. Coming to start game, this is mostly about initializations and triggering the motion of the moles. So we set score to 0. We set this variable to false because initially our game is not over. We reflect our score on scoreboard. We just trigger the motion of our moles, and since this triggers the motion of the moles, and this is an endless function. This never ends, right? If game over is never set to false, sorry, if game over is never set to true, then this function keeps on running. Okay. So what we need to do, we just after this much amount of time, we set this game over to true. It basically stops the motion of the movie. Okay. So we initialize the variables, we trigger the motion of the move, and after this much amount of time, we set this variable to true, which basically stops the motion of the move. Now coming to the last part, we have a function handle click with us. What this does is, as soon as we detect that our mole is clicked, we just increment our score and we update the leaderboard. But before that, we add a check that if the event we tracked is fake, that generated by script and not by user, then we just set the score to 0. We update the scoreboard and set it to 02 and alert the user that hey, we have detected that we have cheated, and then we set our is game over variable to 2 so that the game stops and we return. We don't update its score, the player's score, and we don't update the scoreboard. Okay, we just return and end the game. Can we add a start button? Yeah, we will add a start button. Let's add let's add a button, and which on click triggers start game. So what this button does is, as soon as you press it, it triggers this function. It just invokes this function. Okay. If we refresh a browser, what happens? So we refresh, you see we have a button. So if you start start game. You see, if we start the game, then our moles keep keeping out, and if we click them, our score gets updated. So your game is ready. Yeah, my score was 14. Please do post your highest score in channel. So yeah, so you see, we have made our game, and that was the end of this lecture. And I hope you guys got an idea of how games are developed in JS. This was really simple game. There are more complex games and more complex logic which are to be implemented by developing the games. And scoreboard is not updating on click. your scoreboard is not updating. Did you do this? Scoreboard dot text content is equal to score. Yeah. Okay. So did you attach this event listener to those moles? Some please reply. Okay, you just post it on Discord channel with the screenshot what the whatever problem you're facing. I'll clear it there. Yeah. So yeah. Okay. So if you didn't get any part of this lecture, please go through the recording. We'll be uploading shortly on our YouTube channel. And as I mentioned earlier, we are always here to help you out. You can just post your queries and doubts on our Discord channel. And if you felt we were lacking something in our lectures, please feel free to give us feedback. We are always open to it. Okay, so yeah, that was it. Goodbye. Thanks for coming and happy coding.
ऋत्विक
हाँ
वो रिकॉर्डिंग स्टॉप कर दो प्लीज
हाँ रिकॉर्डिंग स्टॉप कर दूँ
थैंक्स
स्टॉप शेयरिंग कर दूँ मेरे में रिकॉर्डिंग स्टॉप करने का
मैं कर देता हूँ, मैं होस्ट बन गया हूँ।
हाँ वही मेरे में ऑप्शन चला गया तो ठीक है तो कर दो लोगों को कुछ डाउट्स हैं यार कि